You spend enough time on the road, you learn a few things. You learn the particular hiss your air brakes make right before they grip. You learn the exact point in your third coffee of the night where the jitters outweigh the focus. And you learn that every stretch of highway has its own ghost. Not always a literal ghost, you understand. Sometimes it's just a feeling, a memory baked into the asphalt. Out west, in the desert, the ghosts are wide and lonely, heat shimmering off the blacktop. Down south, they're thick and heavy, like the humidity, smelling of swamp water and old sorrows. But there's nothing, and I mean nothing, like the ghosts in the woods of Maine.
My story starts like 1,000 others, at a greasy spoon off the I-95, somewhere south of Bangor. It was late November, the kind of cold that seeps right through the steel of your cab and settles deep in your bones. I was hauling a load of industrial milling equipment, heavy, awkward, and paying well enough to make the miserable route worth it. Inside, the place smelled of burnt coffee and fried bacon. I was sat at the counter, nursing a mug of something that was probably coffee an hour ago. An old-timer was next to me, a guy whose face was a road map of long nights and hard miles. His name was Earl, or maybe it was Red, one of those single-syllable trucker names. He saw the route plan I had spread out on the counter. Taking the 9 up to Calais, I think cutting inland on the airline, eh? He rasped, pointing a shaky, nicotine-stained finger. Brave man.
It's the quickest route, I said, shrugging. Gotta make the drop by sunrise. He took a long, slow sip of his coffee. Quickest ain't always best, son. Especially not at night. Not on that road. He leaned in, and his voice dropped to a low, conspiratorial whisper. You'll see him out there. Just be ready for it. See what? Black ice? Moose? I dodged more than my share of moose on these northern runs. Hitting one of those like hitting a brick wall that got up and walked away. He shook his head. A slow, deliberate motion. Worse, you'll see the deer. I must have looked at him like he was crazy. Deer, big deal.
Not just any deer, he continued, ignoring my skepticism. These ones, they don't act right. They'll come out of the woods, right onto the shoulder, and they'll just stand there in your high beams, and they'll watch you pass. He paused, looking down into his empty mug like he was reading tea leaves. The thing is, son, they're not scared of you, and you'll know why when you see their faces. The faces? I laughed a little. What, are they ugly? He looked up at me then, and there was no humor in his eyes, just a deep, tired kind of dread. They smile, he said, his voice barely audible. A big, wide, human smile, and their eyes are like people's eyes. They know you. They know what you're hauling, where you're going, and they know how your run is gonna end. He got up then, threw a few crumpled bills on the counter, and gave my shoulder a hard pat. Just keep your foot on the gas, he said. Don't stop, and for God's sake, don't stare back. He walked out, the little bell on the door jingling his exit. I sat there for a minute, the cold from the open door washing over me. A truck stop legend, a tall tale to scare the new guys. That's all it was. I finished my coffee, paid my bill, and walked out into the biting wind, climbing back into the warm, rumbling belly of my rig. The road was waiting. For the first 100 miles, it was just me, the roar of my Cummins diesel, and the endless tunnel of black pines illuminated by my headlights. The old man's story was a stupid little bug buzzing in the back of my mind, easily swatted away. It was just a road, just a job. And then I saw it. About 50 yards ahead on the right shoulder, a shape materialized from the darkness, a deer. It was a big buck, its antlers like a thorny crown. Just like the old man said, it wasn't running. It was just standing there, perfectly still, its head turned towards me. I slowed down out of habit, my hand hovering over the air horn, but I didn't press it. I couldn't. I was mesmerized. As my headlights hit it full on, I saw what he meant. The animal's head was tilted, his lips curled back, pulled back from a set of dark, unnervingly flat teeth into a wide, impossibly broad smile. It wasn't a snarl of a cornered animal, it was a grin. A knowing, intelligent grin. In the eyes. My God, the eyes. There was no dumb animal panic in them. They were dark, lucid, and fixed on me. They weren't reflecting my headlights. They were absorbing them. In that moment, I felt like that thing wasn't just seeing a truck. It was seeing me right there in my driver's seat with my half-eaten bag of jerky on the dash and a picture of a dog I never owned taped to the console. It saw right through the steel and glass. I passed it, my whole body rigid, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I risked a look in my passenger side mirror. It was still there, standing, watching, smiling in the darkness as my taillights bled away into the night. My heart was pounding a hole in my chest. This wasn't a legend, and my run was far from over. For the next few hours, every shadow played tricks on me. A bent road sign looked like an antler. A cluster of birch trees looked like a pair of long, spindly legs. The old man's words echoed in my head with every mile that clicked over on the odometer. They know how your run is gonna end. I tried to rationalize it. It was fatigue, hypnagogic hallucinations, the play of light and shadow on a deer with some kind of facial deformities, maybe a disease. Mange? Could mange make a deer smile like a used car salesman? I kept telling myself these things, but the cold pit in my stomach wouldn't go away. The image was burned onto the back of my eyelids, those human eyes, that awful silent grin. I made the delivery in Calais just as the sun was painting the eastern sky a bruised purple and gray. Dropping the milling equipment was a relief. The journey back was always easier. An empty trailer, a lighter load, a bigger paycheck waiting at the end. I slept through a few hours in a grimy motel, the kind where you don't take your boots off, and tried to forget about the grinning deer. But the road pulls you back. 2 weeks later, I got another run up to Maine. This time, I was hauling a generator for a weather station deep in the northern part of the state. It was another night run. I told myself I'd take the longer, more populated route, stick to the main interstate. But the dispatcher was breathing down my neck, and the clock was ticking. Before I knew it, I was back on the airline, Route 9, cutting through that same endless, oppressive forest. I was dreading it, scanning the tree line with an anxiety that felt like a low-grade electric current running under my skin. And sure enough, just past a place called Beddington, I saw one. Then another. This time they were on opposite sides of the road, a silent, welcoming committee. Both standing stock still, both with that same grotesque, painted-on smile. They watched me pass like spectators at a parade. This time, though, something was different. It wasn't just the presence of two of them. It was a feeling they gave off, a sense of urgency. As I drove through the invisible date they formed, the air in my cab felt colder. The hairs on my arms stood on end. I had this overwhelming instinctual urge to slow down, an old trucker's gut feeling maybe, or maybe something else, something they'd put in my head. I eased my foot off the accelerator, letting the big rig coast and gear down. My speed dropped from 55 to 40. The road ahead curved sharply to the left, a blind corner shrouded in thick pines. I tapped the brakes, the air sighing softly. As I rounded the bend, I saw it. A massive bull moose, bigger than any I'd ever seen, was standing in the dead center of my lane. It had just emerged from the trees. If I had been going my normal speed, I would have had two options. Hit it head on, which would have likely killed us both and sent my rig into the trees, or swerve and jackknife the empty trailer into a ditch. There was no time to stop. But at 40, I had a chance. My heart leaped into my throat. I slammed on the brakes and the truck groaned, tires screaming on the cold pavement. The moose turned its enormous head, its eyes wide and vacant in my high beams. The normal, terrified eyes of a wild animal. Not like the deer. Not at all. It took a clumsy step back, then scrambled for purchase and crashed back into the undergrowth on the far side of the road. I brought the truck to a complete stop, my cab just feet from where the animal had been. I sat there for a long minute, the engine rumbling, my own breathing loud and ragged in my ears. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grip the wheel. I would be dead, or close to it. Slowly, I put the truck back in gear and started rolling forward. As I passed the spot where the moose had entered the road, I glanced to my left, back towards the blind curve. And I saw him. Just inside the tree line, barely visible, stood another one of the smiling deer. He was looking not at me, but down the road, in the direction the moose had fled. His smile seemed smug, satisfied, as if to say, "See, we told you." A chilling realization washed over me. The old-timer said they knew how your run was going to end, but he never said they couldn't be wrong. Or maybe he was wrong. Maybe they weren't omens of a fixed fate. Maybe they were warnings, a traffic advisory from a place I couldn't begin to understand. That thought was somehow even more terrifying, because if they were trying to help me, that meant two things. One, I was in enough danger that I needed help from a pack of grinning cryptids. And two, it raised a much more important question. If they were helping me now, what would happen when they decided not to? For a while after the moose incident, I avoided Maine. I took runs heading west, down south, anywhere but New England. I traded the oppressive quiet of the pine forests for the open plains of the Midwest and the rolling hills of Tennessee. I convinced myself the smiling deer were a bad dream, a localized bit of road madness brought on by too much caffeine and not enough sleep. But money talks, and a man's got to eat. 6 months later, a prime job came up. An independent contract, oversized load, special handling, paying double the usual rate. The destination was a private address, deep in the unorganized territory of northwest Piscataquis, Maine, the most remote part of a very remote state. The cargo is listed simply as architectural feature, crated and sealed, wide load permits required. It sounded weird, but the money was too good to pass up. I felt a surge of relief. Oversized loads like this were restricted to daylight hours. No more high beams cutting through the dark. No more shadows playing tricks. The deer, whatever they were, seemed to be creatures of the night. In the bright light of day, I'd be safe. The first day of the haul was uneventful. But the second day, the roads started to change. They got narrower, twistier. The towns got smaller, then disappeared altogether. By late afternoon, I was deep in the woods. The sun was getting low, casting long, distorted shadows across the road. There was no cell service. The sense of isolation was absolute. That's when I saw the first one. It was broad daylight, maybe 4 in the afternoon, but the forest was so thick it felt like twilight. It was standing in a small clearing a few hundred feet off the road. It wasn't smiling, not yet. It just stood there, watching me, its head tilted. Seeing it in the daylight was somehow worse than seeing it at night. The darkness had provided a cloak of disbelief. In the stark, gray light of day, it was undeniably real. My stomach twisted into a cold knot. I put the hammer down. But then I saw another one further on, and another. They weren't on the road this time. They were in the woods, silent sentinels among the trees. Sometimes I'd only catch a glimpse, the pale flash of a grinning face, the unnatural darkness of a human eye staring from behind a thicket of ferns. They were flanking me, pacing me. This wasn't a warning. It felt like an escort. The sun dipped below the tree line, and the world was plunged into a deep, gloomy blue. My permit was for daylight hours only, but there was nowhere to pull over, nowhere to stop. All I could do was push on, my headlights now cutting a desperate, lonely path to the encroaching darkness. They started to get bolder. One walked out onto the road ahead, paused to look at me with that chilling smile, then casually ambled into the woods on the other side. My hands were slick with sweat on the wheel. What the hell was our calling that had him so interested?
The creepiest part came when I had to navigate a rickety-looking wooden bridge over a dark, rushing river. I was crawling, barely doing 5 miles an hour, the wood groaning under the immense weight of my rig. I glanced up my passenger side window, down towards the riverbank, and my blood ran cold. Lined up along the rocky shore just below the bridge was a crowd of them, maybe a dozen, all of them standing in the murky gloom, their heads upturned, all of them looking at me, and all of them were smiling that same wide, terrible smile. It was a jury, a congregation, a silent, grinning audience to my slow, grinding progress.
In the center of the group was one that was larger than the rest, a stag with a magnificent, terrifying rack of antlers. His smile seemed wider, his eyes more intelligent, more ancient. It felt like he was the one in charge. As I passed over him, I swear he nodded, a slow, deliberate dip of his head. It wasn't a warning, it wasn't a threat. It felt like approval, like I was passing some kind of test.
Once I was off the bridge and back on solid ground, I didn't look back. The feeling of being watched was no longer a feeling. It was a physical pressure, a weight on my shoulders as heavy as the cargo on my trailer. I was no longer just a trucker hauling a load. I was a courier, delivering a package to a very strange, very powerful recipient. And his welcoming party was already here.
The rest of the drive was a blur of heightened paranoia. Every snapping twig in the woods sounded like a footstep. I was navigating now by a set of hand-drawn instructions that had come with the job paperwork. 17.3 miles past the wooden bridge, turn left onto the unmarked gravel road. Finally, a side, an opening in the trees so narrow I almost missed it. I cranked the wheel and began the slow, arduous process of maneuvering my rig onto the path. The final leg of the journey was the worst. The gravel road wound for what felt like an eternity. Twice a deer darted across the path, its grinning face a fleeting, nightmarish image. They weren't just escorting me anymore. They were hurting me, funneling me towards my final destination.
After about 20 minutes of this slow-motion hell, the road opened into a large circular clearing. In front of me was a gate, a colossal wall of wrought iron and dark stone, at least 20 feet high, flanked by dense forest. It was the kind of entrance you'd expect to see at a Gothic mansion. I pulled the truck to a stop. As my eyes adjusted, I looked back the way I came. Standing right in the middle of the road, where the forest began, was the big stag from the riverbank. He was perfectly still, a guard at the edge of his kingdom. He had led me here, and now his job was done.
A motion-activated floodlight suddenly blazed to life above the gate, making me jump. A hidden speaker crackled. "State your name and business." "Delivery," I said, my voice hoarse. I gave them my name and the consignment number. There was a long silence. "Proceed," the speaker squawked. With a loud, grinding groan, the massive iron gates began to swing inward. I took one last look in the mirror. The stag was gone. The road behind me was empty. I put the truck in gear and slowly rolled forward. The gates began to close behind me with a heavy, final clang. I was inside. The driveway was paved and smooth. It led to a sprawling, modern-looking compound, all sharp angles, dark wood, and huge panes of glass. Men in dark, simple uniforms, not police, not military, something else, emerged from the shadows, carrying powerful flashlights. One of them
Clearly, the man in charge approached my window. He was a tall man with a gaunt face and pale, watchful eyes. He didn't smile. "You're late," he said, his voice flat. "Road was rough," I managed to say.
He gave a slight, dismissive nod and looked past me, back towards the gate. "The sentinels can be unpredictable," he said matter-of-factly. "Sometimes they guide, sometimes they delay." He turned his gaze back to me, and his pale eyes seemed to look right through me, just like the deer's had. "But they always ensure the cargo arrives. They knew you were the right driver for the job." The sentinels. He called them sentinels. A wave of dizziness washed over me. This wasn't just a strange delivery. I had stumbled into something ancient. These people, this place, and the grinning things in the forest were all connected. The weight on my trailer suddenly felt a million times heavier and infinitely more terrifying.
The men in uniform swarmed my rig with an unnerving, practiced silence. A heavy-duty forklift, larger than any I'd ever seen, emerged from a garage bay and carefully, precisely, lifted the entire tarp-covered crate off my lowboy. I was told to stay in my cab. I never saw what was under the tarp. I'm glad I didn't. All I know is that it was heavy, and it absorbed the light. As they carried it into the main building, it felt like the entire florist held its breath.
Once my trailer was empty, the gaunt man came back to my window. He handed me a tablet to sign, then an envelope thick with cash, way more than the agreed-upon amount. "A bonus," he said, his pale eyes fixed on mine, "for your discretion and for your cooperation with the escort." He then looked at me, and the corner of his thin mouth twitched upward in the slightest hint of a smile. It wasn't the wide, manic grin of the deer, but it shared the same DNA. "The road back will be clear," he said. "They are satisfied. You won't see them again tonight." That was the most chilling thing he could have possibly said. It confirmed everything. It was a system, and for one long, terrifying night, I had been a part of it.
The huge gates groaned open once more. I didn't need to be told twice. I put my rig in gear and rolled out of that place, not looking back. As soon as my trailer cleared the gate, it slammed shut behind me with that same final, booming thud. The drive back was exactly as the man had promised. The woods were just woods. The silence was just silence. There were no eyes watching me from the trees, no grinning faces in my high beams. The road was empty, and I have never felt more alone or more terrified in my entire life. Their absence was 1,000 times worse than their presence. I drove all night, fueled by a fear so profound it was better than any caffeine pill. I didn't stop until I saw the sunrise over the flat, open farmlands of Massachusetts. I didn't feel safe until the pine trees had completely disappeared from my mirrors. I quit that job a week later. I couldn't do it anymore. I sold my rig and took a local job, driving a dump truck. No more long hauls. No more nights alone on dark highways. I stay in the city, where the only ghosts are the exhaust fumes of other cars, and the only strange creatures are the people you see on the late-night bus. But I never forgot. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I can still see them when I close my eyes. The smiling deer of Maine. I don't know what they are. Guardians, demons, something older than the trees they live in. All I know is that every trucker has a story. Mine are real. They stand on the side of the darkest roads, and they smile at you with human eyes. They see the cargo you carry in your trailer, and they see the cargo you carry in your soul. And that night, in the deep woods of Maine, I learned what my heaviest cargo was. It wasn't the architectural feature on my lowboy. It was the knowledge that there are things in this world, just off the edge of the map, that are
ancient and intelligent and utterly indifferent to us. And sometimes, if you're lucky or unlucky, they ask you to make a delivery, and you'd better not be late.